And welcome to the NOLA Rundown. This is Will Osgood. I'll be alone tonight, doing our first episode of the 2019 year. And it's just going to be a relatively brief episode, like I said, it's just me. Jason and Jordan couldn't make it tonight. But I wanted to go ahead and do a very, very quick 2018 Saints review from my perspective, and then get into Sunday's NFC Divisional Round game between the Eagles and the Saints at the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. So, real quick, of course, the Saints finished the season 13-3, losing 2 of the last 5 games, I believe it was, after they started 10-1. Yeah, that sounds right. But still secured the number 1 overall seed in the NFC, which secures home field throughout the NFC playoffs, and basically that just means that if they win this Sunday, they will host either the Cowboys or the Rams the following Sunday at the Dome. Of course, the Saints struggled out the gate, as they always do, or seemingly always do, narrowly escaping another 0-2 start by barely beating the Browns, who in hindsight I think we could say would have won that game if Hugh Jackson had put in Baker Mayfield earlier. But then, week 3, went to Atlanta, which of course is the place where this year's Super Bowl will be held, and in an omen maybe that harkens back to the 2009 World Championship season, won in a very dramatic fashion, and like in the 2009 season, winning that game in the site of the Super Bowl that season, Drew Brees also had 2 rushing touchdowns. And so from there you could start to see some of the potential good omens coming into play. Some other similarities I think that you could talk about this year and that 2009 season. Excuse me. The same 3 losses, or both campaigns, the Saints went 13-3 and lost to the same 3 teams. The Buccaneers, Cowboys, and Panthers, not exactly in that order, but nonetheless, as well. You could just look at it, opportunistic defenses, although I think this defense is a little bit better. And then an offense that's pretty balanced, an offense that really can run the football almost as well as it can throw it, and yet Brees, at least for the entirety of this year, though he's had some games where he hasn't had to do as much, he's been pretty much lights out, and there's no reason to suspect that'll end in this postseason. If anything, he's shown throughout his career that he gets better in the postseason, and I think we can expect that. Another thing that in our NOLA Rundown chat that we have, which includes Jason, Jordan, and then Trey Sarver, who's been on a few episodes, Andres Serna, who's been on a couple episodes, and Tony, crazy last name. Sorry, Tony. But something that we kind of noticed or pointed out, I think it was Trey, I believe, who pointed it out, that in that 2009 season, if you remember, the opposing quarterbacks that the Saints faced were Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer, Brett Favre, Hall of Famer, Peyton Manning, Hall of Famer, which you may look at it and say, well, there's nothing like that. We can't, as it stands right now, we have no reason to believe that Nick Foles will be a Hall of Famer, and then whether it's Dak Prescott or Jared Goff in the next game, they're, we can't say Hall of Famer, and then we don't, it's too far ahead to even look to the Super Bowl to see who will play, although the Patriots would still be in line. His point was more that it seems like the Saints tend to play down a level when playing against kind of crappier quarterbacks in the playoffs. But then I pointed out that the similarities with those three that Nick Foles at least actually shares is that they've all won Super Bowls. They've all, I believe, been Super Bowl MVPs, maybe not Favre, but Manning and Warner, I believe, had. And so there is a little bit of an omen there. Now, ultimately, omens don't mean a whole lot, right? They're fun storylines, but at the end of the day, they're just that. They're storylines. What really matters is what happens in between the lines on Sunday. Now, there was another fun storyline that just came out today that Sean Payton, and he's known, especially in the playoffs, as being a motivational guru, if you will, that on, I believe it was Monday, by all accounts it was Monday, brought in security guards or what have you, the Lombardi Trophy, and $250,000 in actual cash, which I guess is why the security guards were there. And proceeded to tell his players, you win 3 games, this is what you get. And of course it's more dramatic than I can possibly say it. The point being, you do this, you win these 3 games, this is one part of the reward. Just a really interesting motivational tool. I certainly never would have thought of that. But I think that's one of the things that makes Peyton great. Not only is he a great play caller, by all accounts a great communicator, but at this point, I think in football lore, I think we almost underestimate or undervalue motivation, and it seems like he seems to get that still is necessary. Maybe it still would be possible to overvalue it, but it's still necessary for a coach to be able to do that. So, interesting story. We'll see if that really does get the players going. To harken back to that 2009 season again, I kind of do feel like this Eagles game is another wood bat game. Now, maybe you don't use that terminology, maybe you don't need to. But it's a lunch pail game, whatever you want to call it. I feel like it's a game, again, and especially the way the Eagles have played the last few weeks, as they've gotten hot here at the end of the year, that they play tough defense. They're not necessarily gonna, score a ton of points, although they're capable, and they have some good weapons. Alshon Jeffrey's been a beast lately. Obviously, Zach Ertz is a really difficult matchup at the tight end spot. Golden Tate's been really good for them, and of course caught the game-winning touchdown pass against Chicago last week. And former Saint Darren Sproles is back and healthy and looks as good as ever. And so, there are definitely some weapons on offense, and they're definitely capable. But the way the Eagles have been winning is primarily with defense. And from what the film that I've watched over the last couple of days and just the stuff that I've looked at, they're doing it by stopping the run. And the secondary that looked so weak against the Saints in Week 11, that the Saints just torched, and even torched, on the ground as well, it's a stark contrast to the unit we saw, in early or middle November. And so it's going to be a tough matchup. I do think it's going to be a lunch pail game. I'm confident that the Saints can come in and win, and do so even, possibly by more than one score. But, this is a week where they're really going to have to put everything into it. And I have every right to believe they will, or every reason to believe they will. Everybody practiced today on Wednesday in the first, official practice of the week. Although 6 players were limited, but everybody at least practiced, and so that's a good sign. I think having the week off was a huge advantage, so they really could just work on themselves, correct the errors that they saw over the last couple games, do a final quarter of the season review and self-scouting and all of those things. I think will end up being helpful for this game. Of course, there's a little bit of history between the Eagles and the Saints in the playoffs. The very first time in franchise history that the Saints hosted an NFC Divisional Round game was 2006. I think I'm right on that. And it was against the Eagles, of course. Not much has changed for the Saints, at least in terms of, who's at the top of the hierarchy. Of course, still Mickey Loomis, in the, I guess he's executive president or whatever, but still the main guy calling the shots up there, and Sean Payton is the head coach, and Drew Brees at quarterback. Obviously a little bit different in Philly, but nonetheless, still a lot of similarities as well. And the Saints, of course, won that game and went to their first ever NFC Championship game the following weekend in Chicago. They also played in the 2013 playoffs, which was a wild card weekend game in Philadelphia, and the Saints went into Philly and won that game. So, if you're looking for omens or history between the two in the playoffs, certainly that favors the Saints as well. And the Saints have not lost the divisional round game at home. Of course, they've only played 2. But they've won both of them. And both of them have been fairly, I think you could say, convincing. Certainly the 2009 game against the Arizona Cardinals was even more convincing. And Saints fans would love to see that. One last final note that I or tidbit that I thought was, or would be interesting, is if the Saints decided to go to their color rush unis again and really put it in the faces of the Eagles, who have, talked a little bit this week already about feeling disrespected by the Saints running up the score the last time they played and all that. And that would just be a little bit of, reminding them of it, as cocky and arrogant or just confident, if you want to put it nicely, that Sean Payton and this team is. I would expect them, and I haven't heard anything yet, but I would expect them just to go with the All Blacks. That seems to be kind of their thing this year. But if they really wanted to put it in the Eagles' heads even before the game, that might be something they could do. I wouldn't mind it. I'm sure plenty of Saints fans would be okay with it. But most likely, I'm assuming they'll be in the All Blacks. And it's worked pretty well for them at home this year. So anyway, I do want to, excuse me, just let anyone know who's listening to this, that we are back. You can find us on